Hello, welcome to the self-learning platform by Dr. Sushma SIngh. Today in Unit 2 Democracy, we are going to start our lecture with topic Democracy, Procedural and Substantive. In large and complex societies, it is not always possible for people to gather together to make decisions on each and every issue, as they did in the direct democracy of the ancient Athens. This is why modern democracy works through the representative institutions. People elect their representatives to the legislature or assembly, and these representatives are authorized to take decisions on behalf of those who elected them. Ultimate sovereignty, however, remains with the people, who can hold their representatives accountable and refuse to re-elect them when the next election comes round. Representative government is almost synonymous with the idea of democracy today. However, democracy should not be seen merely as a set of institutions, for example, free and fair elections, legislative assemblies, and constitutional government arising out of these. This view of democracy is described as the procedural democracy because it emphasizes on the procedures and institutions of democracy. It fails to see that notwithstanding formal political equality, some citizens may be more equal than others and may enjoy a greater voice than others in the determining of decisions. More often than not, it would be the poorer, less educated, and socially disadvantaged citizen who would be unable to fully practice their democratic rights. Social and economic inequalities make it difficult for a formal participation to be effective. This is why theorists emphasize the importance of substantive democracy. This ideal suggests a society of truly equal citizens who are politically engaged, tolerant of different opinions and ways of life, and have an equal voice in choosing their rulers and holding them accountable. The outcomes and decisions of the democratic process would then be mindful of the interest of all rather than the interest of a few powerful groups and individuals in society. This also means that democracy is and should be the principle of organization, not only of government but also the organizing principle of all collective life in society. We could argue, however, that this is not possible unless and until the background conditions for equality are met, because social inequality makes formal political equality relatively meaningless. Even the free exercise of the franchise, for example, may require freedom from caste superiors, from dominant landlords, or in the case of women, from the male head of the household. This freedom may be curtailed when people do not have the power of independent decision making or adequate access to relevant information, and above all, when despite their exercise of the franchise, they are unable to get a responsive administration. In societies where there are minorities based on religion, language, and ethnicity, the majority principle tends to work to the disadvantage of minority. for they may be systematically outvoted, and they may never have a real or equal opportunity to influence the outcome of the decision making process. Now let us move to the next topic, types of democracy. And the first one is representative democracy and its critics. Since direct democracy is not possible in large and complex societies, the mechanism through which people take part indirectly in government is through electing representatives to carry out their will. For early social contract theorists such as Hobbes and Locke, the representative government was a form of government unauthorized by the people to act on its behalf. For Rousseau, however, sovereign power over the state should rest in the hands of the citizenry and its general will, because of the opinions and interests of the representatives could never be identical to those of the electorate. Be that as it was, it may today representative government based on the majority principle is the considered the best way of the giving effect to the democratic impulse. It has, however, two types of critics: those who consider it unrealistic and those who consider it inadequate. Particularly, Democrats discussed the Sufisian view of the democracy projects this statement of the classical 18th century theory of democracy as an inaccurate account of what democracy is really about. To Joseph, the classical theory of democracy assumes mistakenly that the sovereignty lies in the hands of the people who elect individuals to be to an assembly where their will can be carried out. Democracy is projected as an institutional arrangement for arriving at political decisions which realizes the common good in this way. In reality, however, Joseph argues democracy is not about popular sovereignty. It is not really the case that the primary task of democracy is to the vest political power in the hands of the sovereign electorate, and its secondary task to elect leaders. On the contrary, the main purpose of democracy seems to be elect leaders from among a given set of candidates who compete with each other for the people's vote. Leadership is the driving force; the people merely give their endorsement to one or the other leader. This has been called the realistic theory of democracy. Now let us move to the next, participatory democracy. The classical theory of participatory democracy is found in the writings of the Rousseau and John Stuart Mill. Rousseau's theory depends upon the participation of every individual citizen in political decision making. The relationship between the citizens is one of the interdependence, such that each individual is equally dependent upon all other, viewed collectively as the sovereign participation. Participation is important not only in decision making but also as a way of protecting private interest and ensuring good government. For Mill, as for Rousseau, participation has an educative function for citizens. Popular democratic government is Mill's ideal polity, in which participatory institutions foster active citizenship and a public spirited character. This is the mechanism through which the individual is made to take public interest into account and to make decisions guided by the idea of the common good, rather than by his own selfish interest. Thus, democratic institutions, especially local ones, are a school of political capacity. In large and complex societies, direct participatory democracy is clearly impossible. Nevertheless, contemporary democratic theorists such as Carlo Pateman and Benjamin Barber have argued in favor of the participatory or strong democracy, in which the ordinary citizen is more fully involved in decision-making processes than is possible within the limits of representative democracy. This could take the form of the strengthening local democracy so that the citizens are involved in community affairs and social movements. Advocates of participatory democracy generally follow Mill in attaching importance to civic education as a way of creating a more active and politically engaged citizenry. Above all, the belief that the political participation is central to the good life for human beings and that it helps to restrain the abuse of power by public officials. Now let us move to the next democracy, that is deliberative democracy. Democracy values open and public deliberation on issues of common concern. It starts from the assumption of individuals as autonomous persons, but does not view the social relationships between these autonomous persons as relationships of conflict of or interest. Rather, it sees people as relating to each other and seeking to influence each other through reasoned argument and persuasion. For advocates of deliberative democracy, persuasion is the best basis for political power because it alone respects the autonomy of individuals and values their capacity for self-government. It also gives individuals control over an important aspect of their lives and makes for greater and continuous accountability of political power. Unlike participatory democracy, it requires individuals to be constantly engaged in making decisions. Deliberative democracy allows for a political division of labor between citizens and professional politicians, though citizens are involved in deliberation about public issues. Now, the next one is social democracy. Social democracy is the form of democracy that is based on a strong commitment to equality. Social democrats therefore support the idea of the welfare state based on redistribution. They believe in the liberal institutions of the representative democracy, but wish to combine these with the idea of social justice. To the extent that the liberalism frequently takes the form of right-wing liberalism, a belief in the unfettered freedom of the individual and the free market. Social democracy is more egalitarian than liberalism. However, it is less radical than Marxist socialism and may be said to stand at the intersection of these two ideologies. Indeed, it has been said that the social democracy is more than democracy and less than socialism. Social democrats argue that all individuals should get an equitable share of society's resources. in order to realize their own plans of life. If poverty or disability or belonging to a minority are obstacles in this respect, then it is the duty of the state to remove such obstacles. Social democracy is thus particularly concerned with providing the conditions for the well-being of the workers, women, the disabled, the elderly, members of the cultural minorities, and so forth. It is basically interested in creating the conditions for equality so that all citizens can enjoy their democratic rights to the same extent. It sees democracy as not only a form of government but also a principle that should inform collective life in society as a whole. Now let us move to the next point, cosmopolitan democracy. Cosmopolitan democracy is an idea advanced in political theorists in the context of globalization, with the coming into being of form of supranational organization such as European Union, and with the advance of economic and cultural globalization, it is believed that the democracy must also respond to these challenges beyond the borders of the nation state. The idea of cosmopolitan democracy is the response to this challenge, though there is no single institution of global governance that has replaced the national state. This theory points to the global civil society being created by the phenomena of globalization from below. The new solidarities being forged across the national borders give rise to the notion of cosmopolitan citizenship. The environment movement and the women's movement are two notable examples of this. As the world is writing more rapidly and closely connected through the communications and internet revolutions, the implications of these developments for democracy are uncertain. Do technological innovations make government more or less accountable? Is it really possible for citizens to participate in them? For instance, though the majority of the members of the World Trade Organization (WTO) are developing countries who represent a majority of the world's citizens, the WTO continues to be responsive to the more prosperous nations and their interests. How can this and other institutions of global governance be democratized? How can the proper conditions of cosmopolitan citizenship be realized? Now let us sum up the unit. In this unit, we examined the historical evolution of democracy from ancient Athens to the modern world. We then proceeded to study democracy in relation to the family of concepts in which it is embedded. For example, autonomy, rights, liberty, and equality. We examined two broad types of justification for democracy, instinct and instrumental, drawing a distinction between the procedural and substantive democracy. We also examined the various types of democracy, including representative democracy and its realistic critics, participatory democracy, deliberative democracy, social democracy, and of vital concern for the future cosmopolitan democracy. Here we want to wind up this lecture and we have come to the end of the unit. Thank you so much for your attention.